The moment you tell someone you've saved $100,000, you have permanently changed the price of every single thing in your relationship with them. Not in a metaphorical sense, in a real, measurable, behavioral sense. You've moved an invisible line inside their head and inside yours about what's fair to expect, what's normal to spend, who should be picking up the tab at dinner. And here's the part that is actually going to cost you. The bigger the number you reveal, the more expensive that revelation becomes. Not because people steal from you, but because you change. Your behavior changes, your spending changes, your identity changes. And most people don't feel it happening until they look at their portfolio a decade later and wonder where the compounding went. This video is about the mechanics of that. Why financial silence is an actual wealth strategy, not a personality quirk. And specifically, how to think about this if you're in the range of $50,000 to a few $100,000 in assets and trying to protect the conditions that allowed you to build it in the first place. The biggest financial mistake most people make is not spending too much. It's announcing that they can. Now, a quick word about what this video is not. This is not about hiding money from your partner, not about lying to your accountant or your attorney, not conspiracy content about someone coming for your savings. That's a different, much dumber video. This is about the quiet, well-documented, behaviorally predictable mechanisms by which financial visibility destroys financial growth. Mechanisms backed by research, quantifiable in dollars, and almost perfectly repeatable once you understand the psychology driving them. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. It uses BlackRock and Vanguard logic to expose the weak points in your plan, and I only ask for your email to send the report so I don't store any of your financial data. Link in the description. Now, here's the central image I want you to hold for this entire video. There's a saying in the Submarine Corps, an old Navy saying that goes back to at least World War II, run silent, run deep. The idea is simple. A submarine is most effective and most survivable when no one knows where it is. It does its best work in the dark, under pressure, invisible to everything on the surface. The moment it surfaces, the moment it makes a noise that registers on someone's sonar, it becomes a target. Everything that made it powerful, the stealth, the surprise, the ability to move freely evaporates. Your wealth is a submarine. It compounds in the dark. It builds options you don't have to explain to anyone. It creates freedom precisely because it's invisible. And the moment you let the wrong people see the blip on the radar, everything gets harder, more expensive, and significantly less free. I'm going to come back to that image throughout this video because it explains things that spreadsheets alone cannot touch. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the exact dollar figure this visibility problem costs the average person with real savings, and I'm going to introduce you to someone whose submarine got forced to the surface at the worst possible moment. But first, here's something that's more broken than most people realize. The gap between what Americans earn and what Americans keep. Because for most people in this country, those two numbers are not moving in the same direction. And the reason why is not what the financial media tells you. Here is a number that should stop you cold. According to a 2023 Charles Schwab survey, 61% of Americans report living paycheck to paycheck. Now, hold on before you dismiss that as a wages problem or a cost of living problem. Because according to a 2023 Lending Club report, 36% of people earning over $100,000 a year also report living paycheck to paycheck. 1 in 3 six-figure earners cannot absorb a month of lost income. That is not a math problem. That is not a wages problem. That is a visibility problem. They got to a certain income level, they let the people around them see it, and then they had to maintain it. The term for this is lifestyle creep. But I've always thought that name was misleading. Creep implies slow, subtle, barely noticeable movement. What's actually happening is more mechanical than that. Think of it as a ratchet. Every time you make a visible upgrade, the new car, the better apartment, the restaurant where the appetizers cost $28, you click the ratchet one notch forward. And here's what a ratchet does that a dial doesn't. It only goes in one direction. You can accumulate. You cannot deaccumulate without friction, without someone noticing, without a conversation you didn't plan on having. Think about what that means structurally. You've set a floor, and that floor is not enforced by your budget, it's enforced by the people who watched you set it. The dinner where you grabbed the check for the table, the vacation you posted, the watch someone noticed on your wrist, the apartment your friends have been inside. Every single one of those moments is a small, informal social contract. This is who I am now, this is my level. Contracts have enforcement mechanisms. Yours will too. You just won't see them until you try to renegotiate. Let me tell you about a guy. I'll call him Derrick. Derrick is a mid-level software engineer at a tech firm in Austin. Makes about $140,000 a year. Around 2019, he gets serious about his finances, maxes his 401k, builds a real 6-month emergency fund, starts moving money into index funds. Nothing fancy, boring, consistent, compound interest maximizing behavior. He's doing it right. And then he makes one mistake. He tells his college friends, not obnoxiously. He's genuinely excited. First person in his family to make real income. Never had money growing up, and he's proud of what he's built. At a birthday dinner, after a couple of beers, he mentions he just crossed $100,000 in investments. One sentence, one number. Watch what happens over the next 2 years. The group starts gravitating towards slightly nicer restaurants. Not every time, but consistently enough. And Derrick, who now carries the social label of the guy who's crushing it financially, never pushes back. Because pushing back feels cheap when you've announced you have money. His girlfriend starts having different conversations about apartments, not demanding, but different. The frame has shifted. When his parents need help with a car repair, they call Derrick, not his brother. He pays it. He's the money guy now. His submarine has surfaced. By 2022, Derrick's net worth has barely moved, despite 3 years of strong income and disciplined savings behavior. Not because anyone robbed him, because the identity he publicly created required maintenance fees that didn't show up on any invoice. They were in the air, in every spending decision, in the background of every conversation about where to eat, where to stay, who should handle this, who should cover that. Here's the reversal I want you to sit with. You think the problem is that people will ask you for money. That's real, and it happens, and we'll get to it. But that is the smaller problem. The deeper problem, the one that costs more, is that you will give money without being asked. Because the identity you've publicly built makes that the path of least resistance. Every single time, automatically. Not because you're weak, because you're responding to incentives exactly like a rational human being who has created a social situation that punishes saying no. Derrick isn't undisciplined. Derrick handed the people around him a lever that moves his money, and they didn't even know they had it. There's research from behavioral economist Richard Thaler, Nobel Prize winner, 2017, on what he calls mental accounting. The idea is that we don't treat money as purely interchangeable. We assign it to psychological categories. And one of those categories for people who have publicly established a financial identity is the maintenance cost of being who I said I am. That cost doesn't appear in your budget. It appears in your behavior, and it compounds over time with the same patience as a bad interest rate. Now here's something that goes even deeper than social pressure, something internal, something your own brain is doing to you. And this is weirder than anything Derrick's friends did to him. There's a body of behavioral economics research, and the most relevant work here comes from researchers at Princeton and the University of Chicago, published in the early 2000s, looking at what they call identity-consistent spending. The core finding, once you publicly identify as someone at a certain financial level, your subconscious starts protecting that identity. Not because you're vain, because that's what human brains do. We maintain cognitive consistency. We behave in ways that match the self-image we've broadcast. And this happens well below conscious decision-making. Here's what it looks like in practice. You mentioned your investments to a coworker. Maybe you said you're good with money. Maybe you visibly spent at a certain level for long enough that your professional reputation calibrated to it. Now, without realizing it, you start filtering spending decisions through a new lens. Does this choice match who I said I am? Ordering the budget option when a colleague is watching feels inconsistent with the image. Saying you're sitting out the work trip for financial reasons feels inconsistent. Driving a visibly lesser car then the one your social circle has mentally assigned to you feels inconsistent. None of this is conscious calculation. All of it costs money. The submarine doesn't protect you from other people's radar. It protects you from your own. Let me make this concrete. Say you're 35 years old. You've saved $200,000 across your 401k and a taxable brokerage account. You've been moderately visible about doing well, not bragging, but it's not a secret. Conservative estimate. Identity consistent spending costs you an extra $400 per month. And I want to be clear that $400 is conservative. I'm including the round of drinks you bought because it felt right, the hotel upgrade on the group trip you didn't fight, the dinner you didn't argue about splitting, the loan that never came back, the family situation that you were the one who handled. $400 a month over 30 years, invested at a 7% average annual return. That is $582,000 in compounding you did not receive. Not from a bad investment decision, not from a market crash, from telling people $582,000. And that is the conservative number. In high-cost cities, in professional environments where status carries weight, in social circles where income is higher, the identity-consistent spending is not $400 a month. It is $800. It is $1,200. And the compounding math does not care about your intentions. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Now I want to introduce you to Marcus. I'm going to come back to Marcus multiple times in the second half of this video because his story is close to a perfect illustration of what happens when the submarine surfaces at the worst possible moment. Marcus is a real estate agent, not a top producer, consistent. Somewhere between $90,000 and $120,000 a year for most of his career. He's good with money in the boring, unglamorous way that actually works. He maxes his Roth IRA every year, starting in his early 30s. He drives a used Honda Accord, not because he can't afford better, but because he genuinely doesn't care what his car communicates. He bought a house well below what the bank approved him for. By his mid-40s, Marcus has roughly $450,000 in invested assets. Not a millionaire. Heading there with real momentum. Here's the key detail about Marcus. Almost nobody knows. His friends think he's comfortable. His family thinks he's responsible. His colleagues assume he's doing okay. Nobody has a number. His submarine is completely submerged. Deep, silent, compounding quietly in the dark. Then his father dies. And in settling the estate, finances have to be disclosed among the siblings. Suddenly, Marcus's number is visible to his 3 brothers and sisters. Not because he chose to reveal it, because legal and financial processes required transparency. I'll come back to what happened next. Because it's textbook. This is where it gets really interesting. Because what I want to talk about now has been documented in academic literature since 1972, but it almost never comes up in personal finance content. It's called the Diderot Effect, and it is one of the most reliably expensive phenomena in consumer behavior. Denis Diderot was an 18th century French philosopher. He edited the first modern encyclopedia. He was one of the primary intellectual architects of the Enlightenment. He was also, for essentially his entire adult life, broke. In 1765, Catherine the Great of Russia, an admirer of his work, purchased his library for 15,000 livres, significant money. Diderot had a windfall. He bought a robe, a beautiful, luxurious scarlet robe, the finest thing he'd ever owned. And then something strange started happening. His apartment looked wrong. The robe was too magnificent for the furniture around it. He needed a new writing desk, one that matched the robe's quality. The new desk made the curtains look dated. New curtains revealed the rug as threadbare. The new rug made the wall art look embarrassing. New art revealed that his sculptures were cheap. Within 1 year, Diderot had completely refurnished his apartment and was nearly destitute again, despite starting with a windfall he'd never had before. He wrote about it in a melancholy, self-aware essay called Regrets on Parting with My Old Dressing Gown. His observation was that the robe had an imperious air which made everything else look out of place. Diderot understood the mechanism. He described it with precision, and then he kept doing it anyway, because that's how powerful the pull is. Here's what the Diderot effect has to do with financial silence. The effect does not actually require you to spend recklessly. It requires you to become visible at a new level. Once people can see your robe, your new car, your renovation, the vacation you posted, the restaurant you apparently frequent now, they recalibrate everything else they know about you against that new baseline, and you feel the pressure to maintain consistency across the whole picture. One upgrade expands the surface area of your life that needs to be maintained. A nice car requires nice looking everything around the car. A nice apartment requires nice looking everything inside the apartment. Each step up doesn't cost what it costs. It costs the entire ecosystem that has to be rebuilt around it. A 2014 study in the Journal of Consumer Psychology found that people who made one visible luxury purchase were 47% more likely to make a second unrelated luxury purchase within 30 days. Not because they suddenly had more money, because the first purchase changed their spending identity, and the second was an attempt to make the visible picture coherent. This is the compounding of the ratchet. Every click creates a new reference point. Every reference point generates new inconsistencies. Every inconsistency creates new spending pressure, and it never reverses on its own. Okay, I know what's in the comments already, but come on, Tom. I worked for this. I deserve nice things. Yes, completely, 100%. And here's what I actually want for you. I want you to buy exactly the things that make your real private life genuinely better. I want you to spend on what actually moves the needle for your quality of life in ways you actually experience, not in ways other people observe. What I don't want, and what the data says will cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, is spending on things as signals. Spending to update other people's mental model of you. Spending to maintain an image that you created by surfacing the submarine. There is a massive difference between buying a nice car because you genuinely love cars, and a car brings you authentic daily pleasure, and buying a nice car because your financial reputation now requires a vehicle that matches it. One of those is a legitimate personal value. The other is Diderot's robe. And the uncomfortable truth is that most people, if they are being brutally honest, are doing a mix of both. The trick to keeping more money is being ruthlessly precise about which is which. Run silent, run deep. The submarine doesn't redecorate its hull so passing ships can admire it. Now let's go back to Marcus. After the estate process, his siblings had a number, $450,000. And here's what started happening, not through conspiracy, not through malice, but through incentives behaving exactly like incentives do. One sibling was going through a financial rough patch. The ask didn't come directly to Marcus. It moved through the family through the kind of indirect communication that is somehow harder to refuse than a direct request. Marcus helped. Then a cousin heard the number through the estate paperwork and reached out with what was transparently a request for capital dressed up as an investment conversation. Marcus's mother, now a widow, dealing with new expenses, started assuming Marcus would handle certain costs because, and this is a direct quote, "You're the one who set up," not demanding, assuming, which is somehow more difficult to push back against. Within 18 months, Marcus had dispersed approximately $65,000 in direct and indirect financial assistance. Some of it he genuinely wanted to give. Some of it he felt unable to refuse without a family conversation he didn't have the energy for. And $65,000, kept invested at 7% annual return for 20 years, is worth approximately $251,000. $250,000. Not gone because Marcus was irresponsible, gone because his number was visible. The submarine surfaced. And submarines that surface become targets not always out of malice, but targets nonetheless. Now here's what financial silence actually buys you. And this is what doesn't get enough airtime because it's not dramatic enough to go viral. Optionality. The ability to choose. Not in investment decisions, specifically in life decisions. Career decisions. In any situation where money is a factor and you're the one who privately controls it. Think about what money actually is. People say it's freedom, which is true, but vague. More specifically, it is negotiating power. In every transaction, formal or informal, financial or social, the person with the most options and the least visible need has the leverage. That is true in a salary negotiation, in a business deal, in a conversation about splitting a check, in a decision about whether to take a risk on something that matters to you. The person who needs the outcome least has the power. Now consider what financial visibility does to that leverage. The moment the people around you have a rough sense of your number, they know your floor. They know what you can absorb. They know what "I can't afford" that sounds like coming from you, which is to say, it sounds false. And when no sounds false, you start saying yes to things that cost you, because yes costs money and no costs credibility, and you've publicly established that you can afford the money. The invisible floor changes everything. Not because you'll use it, because you don't have to. Here's the mini case study with real numbers. 2 people, both 35, both engineers in mid-sized American cities, Kevin and James. Kevin earns $115,000 a year, has about $180,000 saved. He's proud of it, reasonably so, and it's not a secret. His colleagues know he's good with money. His friends know he's doing well. Over the next 15 years, the social ratchet does its work quietly and consistently. Identity, consistent spending. Diderot cascades. Occasional family support. The cumulative cost of being the guy who's doing well. This runs Kevin approximately $500 a month in above baseline spending. Over 15 years, that's $90,000 in direct spending invested at 7%, $147,000 in compounding he did not receive. James earns $110,000, $5,000 less per year, has about $170,000 saved, slightly less. He tells essentially nobody. His friends think he's responsible. His family thinks he's doing okay. His colleagues have no idea. He drives a car that's perfectly nice and perfectly forgettable. He doesn't post vacations. He doesn't mention numbers. His above baseline social visibility spending, maybe $60 to $80 a month. Choices that feel right to him personally. Not socially required by an identity he is obligated to maintain. At 50 years old, Kevin's net worth sits at approximately $820,000. Solid, genuinely good. James's net worth is approximately $1.1 million. Same city, roughly similar income, similar discipline. $300,000 separating them not from smarter investing, not from higher income, not from a lucky break, from visibility. Kevin surfaced. James didn't. And here's the part of James's story I want you to sit with. At 50, James gets a call about a position at a startup, half his current salary, equity that may or may not be worth something, work he actually finds meaningful. Kevin cannot take that call. He has a lifestyle floor that requires his income. He has people around him calibrated to a standard. He has implicit financial commitments, not contractual, not formal, but real, that depend on him maintaining his earning level. James takes the meeting, does the math in private, looks at his submarine, quiet, deep, fully operational, and says yes. Because nobody knows what he's built. Because his optionality is intact. Because the submarine never surfaced. That is what financial silence actually buys you. Not the absence of spending, not austerity. The preservation of the ability to say yes when it matters and no when it doesn't, on your terms, in private, without a negotiation you didn't ask for. Run silent, run deep. Now, let me give you the 3 things that actually matter coming out of this video. I want to be specific, not spend less, not make a budget. This is calibrated to the silence strategy specifically. The first thing, audit your financial visibility. Not your spending, your visibility. Think through the last 12 months. What have you said, posted, mentioned, implied about your financial position to the people in your regular life? What is your lifestyle signal about your income to someone observing you from the outside? What number would a reasonable person assign to you based on what they've seen? If the answer is pretty accurate, or they have a rough idea, you've surfaced. The immediate work is to stop adding data points. No more updates. No more visible upgrades that recalibrate people's sense of your position. You can't undo what's already visible, but you can stop making the picture clearer. Let the submarine start its descent. It takes longer than surfacing, but it works. The second thing, decouple your financial milestones from your social identity. This is genuinely difficult because it cuts against something that feels earned. When you hit 100,000 for the first time, when you cross 250, when you hit 500,000, the instinct is to tell someone. It feels like an achievement that deserves acknowledgement. And it is. But here's the problem. The people best positioned to celebrate with you are the people who already have context on your finances, which means they already have the lever. Celebrate in private. Tell your partner. Write it down somewhere. Do whatever makes it real and acknowledged for you without making it a data point for anyone else's mental model of your wealth. The milestone is not less real because you didn't announce it. The compounding is not less real. The only thing that's missing is the social recognition. And the social recognition is what costs you. The third thing, and I think this is the one that changes how you operate, build what I call the invisible floor. A liquid, accessible reserve that exists entirely outside of anyone else's awareness or expectation. Not your emergency fund people can know that exists in abstract terms. This is different. This is the number you know and nobody else does. The number that means you could absorb any social pressure event, any unexpected ask, any sudden opportunity without flinching, without negotiating, and without anyone else having a vote. The person sitting at a dinner table who knows they could pick up the entire check for everyone but orders from the middle of the menu and says nothing, that is not cheapness. That is not insecurity. That is a submarine that knows exactly where it is and chooses not to ping. The optionality in that moment is worth more than the check. And the only way to have it is to be the only person in the room who knows the number. Now here is Marcus's second act. After 18 months of watching his financial position drain through the slow leak of family expectation, Marcus did something I think was exactly right. He worked with an estate attorney and a financial planner to restructure how his assets were held in ways that made the visible number significantly harder to read. Not to hide from taxes, not to do anything remotely problematic, purely to reduce legibility, to rebuild acoustic silence. He also stopped discussing family financial matters in group settings. He routed those conversations through his attorney. When they came up, not coldly, he still helped. He still contributed where he genuinely chose to, but on his terms, at amounts he decided without a shared ledger that anyone could reference going forward. The last time I talked to Marcus, he was 51. His net worth was north of $700,000. Still not at $1 million, but growing again. Quietly, compounding in the dark the way it works best. Every system in the consumer economy is designed to make your wealth visible. Credit card rewards programs exist to get you spending and signaling. The luxury goods industry is built on the economic value of status display. Social media is, at its core, a wealth visibility machine, a platform engineered to make you broadcast your consumption so that algorithms can monetize your aspirations. The entire advertising industry is built on creating a gap between your current visible status and a slightly better version you could buy. These are not neutral systems. They are incentive machines with enormous budgets pointed directly at your psychology. The fact that keeping wealth private feels slightly awkward, slightly antisocial, slightly uncomfortable, that feeling was built. It emerged organically from aligned economic incentives that profit from your visibility. Not a conspiracy, nobody planned it, but the effect is real. And once you understand it, the discomfort stops being a signal to change course and starts being a signal that you're doing it right. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes, and silence built more than both. There is a concept in naval engineering called the acoustic signature, the unique noise profile that makes a submarine detectable. Modern submarine design is almost entirely focused on reducing acoustic signature, not speed, not firepower, quietness. Because quiet is survivability. Quiet is mission completion. Quiet is the competitive advantage that everything else depends on. Your financial acoustic signature, what you broadcast, what you signal, what you let the people around you calibrate against, that's what you're managing when you practice financial silence. Not the money itself, the signal the money sends. And in a world where everyone is broadcasting everything, running silent isn't a strategy. It's an edge.